No, that just took a picture. No, there it goes. It stopped and then it started. What I want to do is I want to introduce the subject, and I'm going to take time with the syllabus a little bit tonight, especially for those of you that are brand new. It helps you understand what's required in the class, required to pass the class, and what we're asking you to do. So we're going to go over the syllabus in great detail at the beginning. And this particular class, the reason we're sitting up here is we're needing to watch some videos. As you'll notice in a few minutes, the book that we're using is John Maxwell's book. Have any of you ever studied John Maxwell at all? Okay. John Maxwell is what you would call a leadership guru. Everything about his life is leadership. And so this being leadership principles, we thought the best thing to do would be to just let him teach it. So he's going to teach his book, but he's going to do it. It's called the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. So there's 21 different sessions. And what we're going to do is I'm going to let him teach, and each session's like 7 to 12 minutes, something like that. And then we're going to, and for this is for the sake of those that are on listening on YouTube, I'm not going to tape the video for you. We're going to work that out differently with you, but I am going to tape between each video session our questions and the comments that I make based on what he said. Because what I'll do is I'll pick a thing or two that he said and I'll expand it just briefly and take your questions and comments, because we can all grow in our leadership. And he will say things in some ways that might blow your mind. And so we'll take time to discuss that, and I'll tape that for the sake of those taking the class. So just wanted to get us on the same page. Let me start by passing out the syllabus. We'll go over this. Make sure you pass it out there for me. Okay, leadership principles, course description. It's a course of leadership principles using Maxwell's DVD set and companion book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, as well as lecture and discussion. If you've never read this book, it's going to be invaluable. I encourage students to keep all their books, but sometimes a student will sell books. Well, that's fine. But the reason we choose some of the books that we choose is so that you can build yourself a library and you can have resources when developing teachings, etc. And this is one book you will not want to part with. The course is a requirement that meets both the Generation School of Ministry core curriculum requirements, as well as credentialing requirements for the Assemblies of God, Apostolic 415, and other Pentecostal denominations. Course objectives. You'll be able to assess your own leadership skills to determine areas of weakness. Quote, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Unquote. To understand leadership principles and apply them to your own life. To prepare you for being a leader which others will follow. To train and equip others for leadership. Establish leadership life principles to enhance your service in God's kingdom. Teach organizational skills to help you and those you lead reach your God-given potential and be able to teach these same leadership skills to others. The textbook is John Maxwell's book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. I'm not going to require you to get the workbook. In fact, I would encourage you not to, because they've changed it and it doesn't go along with the actual DVDs we're using. So you are going to have to take notes on these DVDs to get down this information. And then extra reading. Either The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard or Leadership is an Art by Max Dupree. Now let me share with you that both of these are very small books. We're asking you to read one of them. And they're both very good. You can choose the one you want to get. One of my favorites is Leadership is an Art. It's an excellent, excellent book written by a Christian man who owned a furniture company. And he tells how he led the people in that furniture company. Course requirements. Here's what's required of you. Number 1, course attendance and participation, of course, are required. Number 2, a leadership book report. Choose one of the above books by Blanchard or Dupree for your book report. And it must be typed, and write a 2 to 3 page book report using the guidelines in the handout. That handout I gave you, what I want you to do is your book reports to be 2 to 3 pages in length. And when we say how many pages, we're always talking double spaced. So, it's not single spaced, double spaced. In the top left corner, put your name, the class it is, and the instructor's name and the date. And then you're going to put the title of the book, the author, the publisher, the city and state, and the date published. And then I want a section on the summary. Give a brief summary of the book, its main purpose and theme. What's he trying to get across in this book? What's its main purpose? An evaluation. Give your evaluation of the book, pros and cons, what you agreed with or disagreed with and why. And then an application. What principles from this book do you plan to apply in your life and ministry? How will you apply those? When will you apply them? What will you do with what you've learned? So there's 3 parts to it after you do the setting it up. A summary, an evaluation, and an application in 2 to 3 pages. So it's a very short paper. In fact, for some of you, it's going to be hard to do it in 2 to 3 pages, okay? Because there's going to be a lot of stuff in here. But you synthesize it down. So that's the first thing you do, leadership book report. Second is a leadership movie. Choose one movie from the approved class list and fill out your evaluation paper as you view the movie. And turn in your evaluation paper in class. I didn't bring that list with me. Some of I'm going to have to bring that next week. Some of the movies, I believe, that are on that are, I think this one you got to watch the language. U571. It's a good leadership movie. I'll bring the list. There are other ones. I'm thinking that one of them is Amazing Grace. I think that's one of them. Has anybody seen that movie, Amazing Grace? Powerful, powerful movie on, using part of it, the life of the guy who wrote Amazing Grace. But it was William Wilberforce who came against slavery in England. And it's a powerful, so I'll bring a list of those. But we want you to get one of those and watch one of those movies. And then there's some things we're asking you to write up on the movie about the leadership principles to pull out of the movie. And then a final exam. This final exam is going to be easy. 21 questions with a question from each law. And 4 essay questions regarding this course and or leaders. So we'll have 21 questions so that you can identify each law. And then 4 essay questions regarding the course and leaders. So course grading, your course attendance and participation is 20%. Just being here and acting like you're interested gives you 20%, okay? A book report's 25%. A leadership movie assignment is 25%. And the final exam is 30%. If you want some extra credit, you could read both books on leadership with book reports. And your class schedule, it's Mondays from 5:30 to 7:30. We'll probably close a little earlier because I try to get out of here a little earlier than supposed to be here till 9:45. I try to get out of here a little after 9, so we squeeze things a little bit. My days are just as yours are, real long, and so. However, there is a mistake on this. I already know it. Most of our modules are 5 weeks in length. This one, in order to get all the modules in the 15-week 15 to 16 month period, we have to put some of them at 4 weeks. This one I noticed is on 4 weeks. It's going to be a real challenge for me to get this one done in 4 weeks, but we're going to try to do it, okay? This particular one is supposed to be 4 weeks. I may have to send the final home rather than take it the last night or something, but we'll figure out how to do it, okay? So it's really supposed to be 4 weeks. We start another module on February the 2nd. So I noticed that after I'd done all of this. Your book report's due the 4th week, and your final exam will really be due the 4th week, or I'll send it home. And instructor contact, if you need to get a hold of me. The best way to do it is email, because I check my email more. Once I see a text and it's wiped off, I forget I've got it. And sometimes it's the same way with the phone, but I keep things on my email so that I can deal with them. Some of you know this, not all of you do. I teach for 3 schools as well as pastor the church. So I have about 6 different emails, and so that's how I keep up with everything, is my emails. So that's the easier way. So questions, you might have on what's required. I call the syllabus your second Bible. That tells you what you're supposed to do. Correct. We're going to start a new module that week. Sometimes there's a week or 2 between modules. This time there's not. But this is a 4-week module, and then we start the next one. And the reason sometimes there's breaks between modules and sometimes there isn't, if we've got a holiday coming up in the middle of one, then we'll start them back to back because we know we've got a day off. There is a holiday during this, Martin Luther, but we're going to be here, okay? We got to be here on Martin Luther King. So don't tell anybody. They'll think I'm prejudiced, but the reason, see, I've always got something to fall back on when they call me prejudiced. We had just started classes. It was too quick for so that's why I didn't choose that one. But anyway, there's so many holidays nowadays, you can't get anything done, So we will be here on that one. So, any other questions or comments?
The books, both John Maxwell's and one of these other ones, we can get them on Amazon.
The best way to get books, for those of you that are new to the school, the best way to get books is Amazon.com. And now here's the rub. When you're behind schedule, like a couple of you are because you're just joining here, when you go on Amazon.com, they will have new books and used books, and sometimes they'll even send you to half.com where you can get cheaper books. When you're behind, you can't buy a used book because it's not coming right from Amazon, and I've seen it take 8 weeks for a used book to get to somebody. That's why I gave you, and I'll give one to you, Kim, if you'll remind me tonight, a list of all the books required for the whole year. So that if you can go on there now, sometimes you can find used books for like 99 cents plus $3.99 shipping. And as long as you don't need it for a few weeks, you can do it that way. Now you're going to need the book immediately. That being said, another good place to get books sometimes is Yesterday's Books. They're on Sylvan, and a lot of times they have them. For those of you that are brand new to the school that may be having a struggle, I might have another copy of one of these that we could pass around while you're waiting on yours or whatever. But the best way when you're behind is just get a new book from Amazon.com. And you can get it sent real quick, So, and if you'll remind me, I'll look and see if I have a couple extra copies laying around. I may have. Any other questions? Okay, so honestly, this is one of my favorite classes. Not because I don't have to teach as much, but because I learn something every time. I've probably listened to these 21 Irrefutable Laws and read the book. Between the two of them, I've probably done it 15, 20 times. And I learn something new every time. I'll hear something and I'll think, why didn't I hear that the last time? It's just a wealth of information. And so what we're going to do is we're going to like watch leadership law number 1, let him teach it, and then as soon as it's done, we'll talk for a minute, and then we'll go to number 2. So you might be going back and forth a little bit, but it's powerful stuff. You're going to have to take some notes. He'll probably go faster than you can take notes, but you want to be sure that you get what the law is. And if you don't have your book especially, if you have your book, you've already got what the law is. In fact, what I may do each time is tell you, now we're going to go to law number 1, which is, and you can write it down, be quicker that way. And then while he's teaching, just take notes on important things that you think you really need to know about that law. Then after it's done, you can ask questions. I'll make comments. Because of the nature of having to get through 21 of them in 4 weeks, my comments are not going to be very lengthy because we got to keep going. But I won't move too quick if there's something that's really you want to question, or you want a little more clarification on, or you want my opinion on. Well, and why do I say that? We all think differently. And so that doesn't make one person right and the other person wrong. As an example, one of the things he will say, and I forget which one it is, it might even be in number 1. One of the things he says, probably the thing he says that I disagree with more than anything else, is he makes the point, he says, leaders are not born. They're made. I disagree with that. Leaders are born. All you have to do is put 10 2-year-olds in a room, and before too many minutes, 9 of them are following one of them. And that one's telling them what to do. Why? That person's a born leader. Now, I know why he says what he says. He says it because he doesn't want you to think, well, I'm not born one, so I can't be one. I think a better way of saying it would be, while leaders are born, leaders can also be made. You can become a better one. Say. So I disagree with the way in which he says that, but it doesn't make him wrong or me right. I understand why he says it. I just believe that there are born leaders, and if you marry one, you know it, right? And so it's so you might ask my opinion on things. Maybe you hear something you think, I'm not sure I agree with that. We can talk about it and break it apart a little bit. So that's what I'm going to be doing on the taping part. So if I turn this off, that means each time I've got these different segments, doesn't it? I don't want that either. I think I'll leave it on. They can at least hear it. And
maybe you could turn the computer to the screen.
It'll be backward. Well, it won't be back. Yeah, the writing will be backwards, but yeah, we can do that. At least, I'm doing my best here to try to figure out how to do it. So go ahead and let's put on number 1, which is the law of the lid. The law of the lid. One of the most important, in my opinion, of the 21. The law of the lid.
The law of the lid. The law of the lid says leadership determines the level of effectiveness. Now, this is a huge law, and although I say one law is not more important than any other law, here's what I do want you to know. If I would start off with any law, I must start off with this one, and here's why. Because if you can buy into this law in the next 5 to 6 minutes as I talk to you, if you can buy into this law, you'll have a great passion to learn all the others, and let me explain why. I'm going to illustrate the importance of this law by using my hands. Watch this for a moment. It's kind of a visual illustration. Let's say, for example, my left hand here represents my ability to lead people. This is how well John Maxwell leads people. This is my leadership lid. Okay. If this hand is my leadership, and if this hand is my business, in other words, my company, my department that I'm overseeing, okay, whatever I'm in charge of, here's what I want you to understand. my department, my business, my company, my organization. Here's what I want you to understand. The lid of my leadership will never allow my business to get any higher. It'll never allow my, in other words, if this truly is my leadership lid, my company, my business, my department, my organization, whatever it is, it can never get any higher than the lid of my leadership. In other words, your leadership, my leadership, our leadership lid, whatever it is going to literally control and determine the size of our business. Now this is huge. If I was sitting where you are right now and I was taking notes, what I'd be saying to myself is something like this. Since the law of the lid says that my leadership is going to determine my effectiveness, the most important thing that I can do in my life is learn how to become a better leader. Let me explain to you. Remember, I've already said to you the laws can be learned. We've already realized that you can learn these laws, okay? In fact, you told your neighbor you can learn these laws. Now, let me explain to you what can happen. Let's say from a 1 to a 10, my leadership lid is a 4. Well, what that means is if I'm a 4 as a leader, then my business, my organization is going to be a 3. Now here's what's not going to happen. If I'm a 4 as a leader, my business or my organization is not going to keep going above that lid and go to a 4, 5, 6, 7. In the history of mankind, the organization has not grown beyond the lid of the leadership of that organization. The leadership contains and controls and determines the size of the business. Now, so if I'm a 4, you look like a great smart audience, so I'm going to ask you a question. If I'm a 4 as a leader, what's my organization going to come to that I lead? But what's my number? 3, 4 max, isn't that right? Can't be any higher. What it's not going to be, it's not going to be a 5, 6, or 7 because my lid is a 4. Now, the good news is I can learn to lead. So here's what I'm saying. If I'm a 4 as a leader and I've got a 3, 3.5, maybe max, maybe a 4, I doubt, company or organization, here's what I want you to see. If I go from a 4 and I start learning leadership to a 5, to a 6, to a 7, all of a sudden, now look what happens. I have capacity for growth. I have potential for growth. My company can go from a 3 to a 4 to a 5 to a 6. In other words, here's what I'm saying. You can literally double the size of your department. You can double the size of your company by just lifting your leadership lid. And every one of you here, everyone that would watch these tapes, I want to say this to you. You can lift your leadership lid. But everything, remember this, everything rises and falls on leadership. By the way, where I learned this, when I lived in San Diego, California, I had a fellow by the name of Don Stevenson who was my mentor. And he was the president of Global Hospitality, and that Global Hospitality literally would buy, they would buy resorts that were going bankrupt. Resorts like La Costa, Greenleaf, any kind of major resort across America that was going under financially. What we found was that this company, Global Hospitality, would come in and they would buy the company. Okay, now get the picture. Here we go. I'm sitting down with Don Stevens about every other month. He's mentoring me. And I asked him one day, I said, Don, when you go buy a bankrupt company, a resort that's going under, are there some things that you always do? And I'll never forget it. He looked at me and said, John, he said, yes, there is. He said, when we go into a bankrupt company, he said, there are 2 things we always do. And I looked at him and said, 2 things? He said, yes, absolutely. He said, the 2 things we always do is, he said, first of all, we train all the people that are in the service business, the employees. In other words, the guys that are out there when the car's pulled up and they're unloading the luggage. He said, we train them all in relational skills. In other words, we train them, we talk about how to remember names, how to get along with people. And he said, the reason we do that, the waiters, the waitresses, the people behind the checkout counter, on the grounds. And he said, what we found is 90% of the people who do not return to the resort after the first visit had a bad experience with the employees of the organization. They weren't treated with great respect, or they were taken care of well. And so he said, what we do is we go through and we train all the people. Now what I do, I'm sitting there and I'm taking notes, and so I'm writing down to me, make sure that you've trained all the people in your organization. Okay. He said, the second thing we do is, he said, every time we take over a bankrupt company, he said, we fire the president. And I don't like that one. And I look at him and say, what do you mean you fire the president? He said, John, he says, every time we take over companies going under, he says, we fire the president. I said, well, it seems a little harsh, isn't it? I mean, don't you first go see him, you know what I mean? Go sit in the office, light a fire in the fireplace, you know, hold hands, do a little kumbaya, you know what I'm talking about? No. He said, John, he said, we fired the president. And I pressed him a little bit more, and finally, I couldn't remember because he was eating the salad. He was just looking down, eating the salad, talking to him. And he stops, puts his fork down, now he's looking at me. It's a little bit ticked that I'm not catching it, you know. And he's looking at me and said, John, listen to me. He said, if the president were any good, the company wouldn't be going bankrupt. The first thing we do is fire the president. I remember finally saying, fire the president. You know what he was teaching me that day? He was teaching me the law of the lid. What he was really saying to me is that it's an absolute fact that in any organization, everything rises and falls on leadership. And the leadership of that organization will determine the size of that organization. And so therefore, when you have a good company that's thriving and doing great business and excelling, you've got good leadership. And when you've got a company that's stagnant and it's going downhill and it's not going well, I can promise you, you have bad leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Now let me tell you what that law did for me as a leader. That day, when I walked out from the table, after listening to Don talk to me, that day, what I realized was that I was responsible as a leader. That I had to now take responsibility for my organization, I had to take responsibility for my people, I had to take responsibility for the success of my company, that I couldn't go and blame someone else. I read a statement recently that's just powerful. Here's what it is. It's easier to go from failure to success than it is to go from excuses to success. That's a tremendous statement. And whenever as a leader I begin to make excuses for why my company is not doing well or why my organization is not doing well, and I begin to go say, well, you know, I mean, we're in the wrong location and we got the wrong people. And listen, company excuses that. If you're the leader, learn to lead and take responsibility for that leadership. Here's the good news. You can grow as a leader. You can become a better leader than you are right now. That I promise you. But take responsibility. Because the law of the lid says the organization or the company cannot rise any higher than your level of leadership. The law of the lid is a huge law. So if you'll notice in your workbook, I ask some questions. Just some simple questions. Questions that I want you on your own to ask yourself. Questions such as, what is the lid number of my leadership? From a 1 to 10, where am I? Question number 2. I love this one. Would those around me agree with my assessment? Get your leadership team together. And by the way, let me just say this. If you know, when you're kind of evaluating yourself, if you put down that you're probably from a 1 to a 10, you're probably like a 9.5. And you ask your team, and you get your team together and say, you know, what do you think my number is? And they say you're a 2.5. You're probably missing something. So let those around you evaluate and assess your leadership. And then question number 3, what is my plan to increase my lid number, my leadership lid number? How am I going to grow it? Because I have found that this is absolutely key. The ability to prepare and do curriculum like we're doing here so that you can grow as a leader. I mean, how am I going to grow my leadership lid? And question number 4, what are the lid numbers of those that work with me? That's a great question. Those that are around you close, because one of the laws we'll study in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership is the law of the inner circle. The law of the inner circle says those closest to me determine the level of my success. So what are the lid numbers of those around me? And then question number 5, what is my plan to increase their lid numbers? What's my plan? How am I going to increase the lid numbers of those around me? Law number 1, the law of the lid.
Interesting. The law of the lid. And so you get the concept. You get the concept. You can't grow it above where you are. So in order to grow your organization, in order to grow your ministry, in order to grow your class, in order to grow whatever, you've got to grow. And that's why I say that we should always be lifelong learners. We should always be learning. Because when you quit learning, you quit growing. And when you quit growing, you quit growing people. See, I think that's the problem in ministry a lot of times. We're trying to grow a church when we're supposed to be growing people. Sure, we want a big church, but we want big people in a big church. And a lot of times, if you're not careful, you got little people in a big church. Or little people in a little church. We have to keep growing. The law of the lid. Some powerful stuff there. I've got a couple things I could go over, but any questions or comments that you might have?
I'm sure he's going to tell us how to be a better leader. I don't know what my lid is if I
Right.
don't know what a good leader is.
Okay, yeah, and that's what's going to be happening. These 21 irrefutable laws. And you're going to find out in these laws that you're better at some than at others. And so what do we have to do? We have to increase in those areas where we're weak. And that will come, right? That will come. Yeah, and that's a good point. How do you evaluate yourself when you're not even sure what a real leader is? You know? Yeah.
At what point, or how long do you think it takes to establish before someone reaches their weight?
Well, no, let's rephrase it. Because you can't say how long does it take for someone to reach their lid, because we do that immediately. But to reach the lid they're going for us.
At what point, I guess, when they're building the company, do they, I don't want to say reach kind of standstill, but I guess maybe at that point, do they set there with, they kind of stop growing? Or how do you, in your opinion, how do you usually think it takes?
Well, I mean, that's a hard question to answer because it depends upon the person, naturally. If there's only if 10 is the highest you can get, do most people get there? Not really. Not really. Okay. When do most people plateau? Is that what you're asking? When do most people plateau? It's probably different times for different people. I think that probably one answer you could give is when they think they're successful and they've reached the ultimate. And when you think that, that's as far as you're going to go. But really, the sky's the limit. Kim, Sunday morning, I piggybacked on that sermon from November the 30th. And one of the concepts was, there's room at the next level. There's all kind of room at the next level. Because very few people are there. But there's a price to pay to get to the next level. And that's why very few people are there. See? And so there's a price to pay to grow your leadership lid. And the question we have to ask ourselves, am I willing to pay the price? What is the price? Well, it's different things, but it could be things such as, I might lose some friends in the process. Now, you have to be sure of two things when that might be the price. Am I willing to pay it? And do I really have to lose people to go there? You understand what I'm saying? Because in my opinion, there's a term that we need to attach to this whole thing. And I got to be careful because we got to go through a lot of these. But there's a term that needs to be attached to the word leadership, and it's servant leadership. In other words, am I a dictatorial leader or am I a servant leader? And if I'm a dictatorial leader, I guarantee you I'm going to lose friends because I'm going to climb on them to get where I want to go. But if I'm a servant leader, I won't lose as many, but I'll probably lose some. Because sometimes the decisions you have to make to get to the next level are not popular decisions. Does that make sense? And am I willing to pay that price? Or am I going to choose to be on a lower level? And I'm not even saying that it's wrong to do that. You just have to understand, if I make that choice, my leadership potential is not as great. I can't take people as far. So one of the things about leaders is, while you don't want to make enemies, you can't base your decisions on what people are going to think about it. If you base all your decisions on what people are going to think about it, you're not going to go very far. Isn't that true? But a servant leader will make decisions that won't be popular and still love the people in the process. Right? See, that's the difference. A couple things I saw here. Everything rises or falls on leadership. We've heard that. But here was one. What's the lid of those around me? If I want to grow to my potential, I have to realize that those around me can push me towards it or hold me back from it. And that's a reality that causes many not to pay the price. See? And you see, because what we're talking about can sound very selfish. But if it's really not about you, it's about becoming all that God's called you to become and leading the way God's called you to lead. It's not selfish. So this is a hard issue, guys. This is a hard issue. Is it not? It's a hard issue. So, I mean, we could spend a lot of time on that, and that's one of the primary ones, the law of the lid, which, let me give you the for those who don't have your book yet, the subtitle for that. Leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. Leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. Now we're going to go to the second law, which is the law of influence. The law of influence. And the sub term for that is the true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. The true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Can we get that in just a minute there? He's trying to write and help me at the same time. Thank you. Alex is a good man. The law, number 2, the law of influence. The true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less.
The second law is the law of influence. And the law of influence says the true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. I love this law, and when I teach it, I find sometimes it throws an emotional curve to people. Let me explain to you what I mean. You see, the law of influence says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. I find most people want to attach other definitions to leadership. They want to say things like, John, I think leadership is title. And by the way, I have a leadership title. Or I think leadership is position. And by the way, I have a leadership position. I find that a lot of people want to tie all kinds of definitions into leadership. But let me just tell you, leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Let me explain it this way. The person with the most influence at any given time, for any given reason, in any given group, is the leader of the pack. Now, what that means is there are times when influence changes. There's times when one person will have more influence than another, but when you get onto another issue or another subject, that another person that leadership may shift a little bit because we are not all strong in all areas. And so therefore, when I'm talking about leadership as influence, what it shows is there's a fluidness of leadership, and that leadership doesn't always stay with one person. In fact, let me give you a perfect example of this. As we study together the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, one of the first things you're going to realize is this. You do not do well in all 21 laws. Okay? For those that are in the studio today, I just want you to know, you won't do well on all 21 laws. Now, here's what's going to happen. As you evaluate yourself on each law, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a tendency to think that when you do well on a law, you're going to say to yourself, Now that is a true law of leadership. And John's right on there. Oh, that is so good. He's just, that is true. And on the laws that you don't do so well, you're going to say, that may not be a law of leadership. Now what you're going to find is you're going to do well on some laws, you're going to not do well on some laws. Hey, that's the way it is. In fact, there are going to be some laws, I'll point them out to you, that I don't do well on. Now here's what I want you to see. That's why it's important for you not only to understand leadership, but that's why it's important for you to have a leadership team. That's why it's important for you to train leaders around you. And here's why. In fact, I have seen over the last 3 decades, in the 80s, I saw that the great word was management. Everybody talked about management. Peter Drucker did some great things on management. When we got to the 90s, in corporate America, it changed from management to leadership. Now, there was a reason for that. See, managers assume things will always stay the same. Leaders assume things will always change. And so in the 80s, when things were stable, wow, we needed managers to kind of control them, to make sure everything was being taken care of. In the 90s, when we got to leadership, all of a sudden it drastically changed. And we needed guys and gals and men and women that were fast-paced and could change and embrace change. And I can tell you, as now we've entered into a whole new century, I can promise you, we've gone from management in the 80s to leadership in the 90s, to now I can tell you, we're going as we've entered in a whole new, not only decade, but a whole new century, we're going now to team leadership. And the reason we're going to team leadership is because the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership will teach you and me, very simply, that you just don't do all 21 things well. You don't, I don't. Now, the moment we understand that, I've got to have a leadership team. And the reason that I have to have a leadership team is because I need people around me that can absolutely make up for my weaknesses and can compliment me. Does that make sense? So, for example, as we're teaching through here, here's what I want you to see. So I walk down here and just kind of use maybe my front row for an example, because this will work. Let's say, for example, this is my leadership team. My name's John. What's your name? Okay, Chuck, perfect. Let's say we're in one of the laws, and let's say Chuck does a better job at moving the laws than I do. One of the reasons we need to know, evaluate ourselves, and one of the reasons we need to have a leadership team around us is because we all need to know that if I get to the law of navigation, by the way, that's a law I'll teach later on. That's a law I'm weak in. I'm not a good navigator. What I have to realize is, but let's say Chuck is I'm a 2 as a navigator, okay? I mean, just trust me, you don't want me to navigate. I'm kind of like Mr. Magoo, okay? So you don't want that. You don't want Mr. Magoo running the ship down. But Chuck, let's say he's a 9. What that means is, when we get to something in our organization that requires navigating, what we do is I take, and now Chuck has more influence. Because if you know Chuck's a better navigator than me, who are you going to follow? See, for too long, we've said, follow me because I have the position. How ridiculous. Follow me because I have the title. I'm the president. I'm the one that's over everybody. Follow me. That's not a good reason to follow somebody. You ought to follow a person because they're competent. You ought to follow a person because they're best. And the secure leaders, and I'll talk about the law of empowerment, that's another law, but the secure leaders look around and say, look, gang, let me tell you something. Chuck's a better navigator than me. So when it comes to navigating the day-to-day process, and we've got to navigate maybe for a 3-6 month period or some issue in the organization, Chuck's going to have the ball, and I'm going to follow Chuck. Because all great leaders are not only leaders, they're great followers. Because they appreciate the value that true leadership brings. Does that make sense? So leadership is influence. I may have influence in some areas. Chuck will have influence in other areas. What's your name? Bridget will have influence. In other words, the person that is the best leader should have the most influence in that given area. Make sense? So look around you and ask yourself, who is influential and in what areas are they influential? That's why, several years ago, I designed a way for people to understand influence as it pertains to leadership that would make sense to them. And in your notes, if you'll take just a moment for me, I want to draw your attention to the 5 levels of leadership. And when I use the word leadership, I can use the word influence, that I use them interchangeably. And what I want to do is I want to walk you through this because this is essential for you to understand where you are as far as what level of influence you have and where you should go to increase your influence level. For example, let's go down to the very bottom step, okay? On that first lowest level, put the word position. Now, that's the lowest level of influence, that's the lowest level of leadership. In other words, when you and I go to an organization, we get a title, we get a position. Now, right inside that step is another blank. I encourage you to put the word rights, because that's the key word when you're on the position level of leadership. Let me explain. When you and I have a title, when you and I have a position, we get certain rights that come with the position. Is that true? They'll look at you and say, you're going to be over these 6 people, this is going to be your department, these are your people that you're responsible for. Okay. In other words, at level number 1, people follow you because they have to. In other words, people say, why are you following that person? Well, it's because they're the boss. They're the leader. I have to. In other words, I'm under them. I really don't have any choice. Now, let me share something with you. Every one of us in this studio, every one of you that watch me do the leadership training, anybody that's just observing what I'm saying right now and understanding someone's leadership, every one of us have had to follow people that weren't good leaders. Isn't that true? How many of you just, we don't need to call out names, okay, let's not get personal here. How many of you have at one time in your business life or your work life had to follow somebody and they were just a lousy leader? I mean, that is absolute go. That's 100% in the studio. Let me ask you this question. How many of you are sitting beside that person right now? Don't go there. Don't go there. The first question is a leadership question. The second question is an IQ question. Okay? Don't raise your hand on the second one. That would not be a good thing. Okay. Now, here's what I'm saying. Everyone else have had to follow people that were not good leaders. Why? Because they had the position and title. This year I'm going to be speaking to the West Point. I'm coming in for 2.5 days. I'm going to be speaking to all the cadets. I'm going to be speaking to the leadership. And they want me to talk about the 21 Interview Laws of Leadership because they teach it there. What's interesting is, my challenge as I go to West Point will be, I'm going to teach 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And so much of the service area is based on rank. And what they're going to have to understand, and what I'm going to do my best to teach, of course, they're very, very sharp, so they're going to understand it very quickly, probably much better than I ever could. And so we're going to have to understand that just because people follow you because you have a position doesn't mean that you're a great leader. Does that make sense? Level number 2 is the permission level. Let me walk you through the rest of these very quickly. And the key word on the inside of level number 2 is relationships. At level number 2, people follow you because they want to. By the way, just stop for a moment and look at your notes. There's a world of difference between 1 and 2. In step number 1, people follow you because they have to. In step number 2, people follow you because they want to, because now you develop relationships with them. Level number 3 is the production level. And the key word is results. Basically what I'm saying at level number 3 is this. At level number 3, people follow you because of what you've done for the organization. In other words, it's growing. The profit's better. The morale is higher. Okay, now all of a sudden people are following you because you've been successful in the organization. That's level 3. Level number 4 is the people development level. That's always my goal. When we talk about a couple of the laws of leadership, I'll talk more about people development. But in people development, the key word is reproduction. Oh yes, people follow you there because of what you have done for them. What you have done for them as individuals. In other words, on level number 3, they follow you because of results and what you've done for the company. Level number 4, they follow you because of what you have done for them. Now they're personally growing. Now they can say, I'm a better person. I'm more effective in my job because you've equipped them and given them tools in the last level. It's what I call the personhood level. And the key word there is respect. And basically, you have done it so well with so many people for so long that people just automatically put you up there. So it's a wonderful level to be on. And I would encourage you on law number 2, just to take some time and look at the questions and ask yourself questions about influence and how you can more effectively influence others. The 5 levels of leadership, which is a lecture in itself, has its own training video because I spend a great deal of time really helping people work through those 5 laws. But for right now, the law of influence says there are 5 levels of influence and you need to know where you are because leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, it's good stuff. Good stuff. Any comments or questions here?
I do. Number 5 was what?
Number 5 was personhood,
Personhood. Oh,
which the other word for it is respect. They're following you because they respect you. So the position, permission, production, people development, and personhood. And boy, yeah, you can see that, can't you? You can see that. Someone else.
Takes time. Takes time to get those. You can't just automatically, people have to get to know you and work with you and find
Right.
out
Right.
before they can follow you like that.
Right. All great leaders are great followers. Isn't that a great statement? All great leaders are great followers. Yes.
I apologize, I need to go back to number 5, the personhood, and all the other ones he talked about, people follow you because of what you've done for them, like for number 4.
Number 4,
Yeah, for
people development,
the development level, yeah, reproduction.
reproduction.
They follow because of what you've done for them. So number 5 is they follow you because they respect
They
you.
respect you.
Okay.
Not just for what you've done, but now, in essence, you've got the position, you've gained their permission because of relationship, they've seen your results in the organization, then they've seen your results in them, and all of a sudden there's great respect, you see. Interesting, and I'm just using this as an example, but I had a fellow in a church I pastored. I pastored a certain church for 18 years. And there was one guy that was with me the whole 18 years. And, you know, I understand what Paul meant when he talked about he's got a thorn in his side, you know. And I'm saying this laughingly now, but there were times I wasn't laughing, you know, because he had a fuse about this long. And we had gone through... We'd gone to hell and back in that 18 years. But when I resigned, finally, and was leaving the church, they were having a going away dinner for Janie and I. And at that dinner, they asked if anybody had something they'd like to say. Well, I knew he'd be one of the first ones up because he always has something to say. And I'm thinking, oh my, you know. And he got up, and I'll never forget his words. And I mean, they were from the heart, because we fought, but we were like brothers, you know, because we'd been through so much together. And I'll never forget what he said. I mean, he said more than this, but this is the gist of what he said. There's nobody in this room, he said, that will be surprised that the pastor and I didn't see eye to eye all the time. Of course, the people are chuckling and laughing. And he said, but there's one thing I've got to say. He's my pastor. He put up with me when nobody else would. He sat with me night after night when my wife almost died in the hospital. And despite the fact that we didn't agree on everything, he's my pastor. He couldn't have said anything better. But, you know, what was that? It was respect. It was respect. See? And now he's someone else's sheep. And all of a sudden, in his sight, I've grown. Because he's someone else's sheep, you know. But anyway, I'm just saying there are these levels. And you don't get to them overnight. They take years sometimes. See. Good stuff. The law of influence. Let me share one story. He's got another set of these that I wish I could get my hands on. It's older than these. It's outdated, but I'd love to get it. And because he teaches these laws from a church standpoint. This he's teaching is more from just a overall leadership standpoint, whether it be church, business, whatever. In fact, he speaks for Fortune 500 companies. He has been invited, and he speaks in Muslim countries. He was invited to one Muslim country. I understand that they said, we want you to come and teach our government officials leadership, but we don't want any of that Bible stuff. He said, no problem. I'll do that. And then he said, not to them, but because all my principles are right out of the Bible. But I don't have to give chapter and verse, But on this set where he's got, where he was talking about churches, he gave a very interesting illustration about leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. He says he went to this church, he was a brand new pastor, went to his first board meeting, and in that first board meeting, he said something like, I think it's imperative if we're going to reach our community that we need to redo our church and remodel our church and get it looking nice. And I would appreciate the board being behind me if someone would make a motion. And he said, when he said that, everybody looked at Claude. And Claude said, you know what, Pastor? I don't think paint is going to make a difference with anybody, and I don't think we should do it. And so then, all in favor, say aye, no ayes. All opposed, say nay, all nays. He said, I knew something. I might have the title, but Claude had the influence. And so he said, the only way I navigated the waters of that is, he said, I had to be Claude's influencer. Because Claude was their influencer. So he said, I would go to, when we were going to have a board meeting, about the week before, I'd call Claude, and Claude was a farmer. He'd say, Claude, can I come out and work with you today? Yeah, Pastor, come on out. So he said, I'd go out to Claude's and be with him all day. And he said, I'd say things like, Claude, have you been down in the basement of the church lately? No, Pastor, I haven't been down there in a few years. He said, well, Claude, we're trying to build a ministry for children. And he said, it's a sight down there. He said, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's mold on the walls. And I wouldn't take my kids or my grandkids there. And I really think if we're going to reach the community, we need to do something about that basement. Claude, would you do me a favor, go down and check that out for me before the board? Yeah, Pastor, I'll do that. So he says the next board meeting, he does this stuff, and then all of a sudden he says, is there anybody else who has anything to say? And Claude says, yeah, Pastor, I do. He said, have any of you guys been down in the basement to look at the basement lately? No. Well, there's mold all over, and we're trying to reach families, and he said, I think we ought to remodel that, and all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No oppose. Now, some people would call that manipulation. I call it being smart. Right? He was influencing the influencer. You've got to realize who's just because you've got the title doesn't mean you've got the influence. It takes a long time for influence to shift. I could tell you a story on that, but I don't have time. But number 2, the law of influence. Good law. Any other questions or comments on this before we move on? Let's go to number 3, which is the law of process. The law of process. And the law of process says, leadership develops daily, not in a day. Leadership develops daily, not in a day. The law of process.
The third law is the law of process. And the law of process says leadership develops daily, not in a day. This is an incredible law. I love to teach it, and the reason I love to teach it is because if a person can understand process, they're going to be very effective as a leader. But if they don't understand the process of becoming a leader, they're going to get very frustrated. Let me explain to you. Many times when I do leadership conferences, when we have a Q&A period of time, the probably most common question asked me when I do leadership conference, somebody raised their hand and said, John, hey, here's the question. Are leaders born? And whenever they ask me the question, are leaders born? I always look at them and I always say, of course they are. Think about that question. I've never met an unborn leader. Don't particularly want to either, thank you very much. Now, what they're really asking us is not asking are leaders born. What they're really asking us, are there leaders that, are people when they're born, they kind of got it. You know what I'm saying? They got it, and are there people when they're born, they don't got it. And I suppose if you got it, you lead. If you don't got it, you get in line. You know what I mean? Hope there's a water fountain at the end somewhere, okay? That's a very important question. Because what I have found is this is so huge. What I have found is there are a lot of people who just think you either have it or you don't have it. And I can tell you right now, that is not true. There are people that have leadership leanings. Of course there are. Just like there are people when they're born, they have kind of musical leanings. So there are leanings toward leadership that some people have that other people don't have. But anyone can learn to be a leader. In fact, that's why I have such a passion to teach leadership. That's why I have such a passion to teach these laws. Because if you learn these laws, it becomes absolutely amazing how well you're going to be able to learn to lead. So let me take a moment and explain to you a couple of important thoughts in this law. In your notes, we overestimate the event and we underestimate the process. I have found this to be very common with people in leadership. They overestimate what an event will do for them. They come to a leadership conference or they read a leadership book. They say, oh my goodness, this is so good. And this is going to make me a leader. This is going to change me. Now, let me just explain to you the difference between the event and the process, because this will help you understand the law process. For example, when you go to a leadership event, I'm talking about like going to a leadership conference, reading a leadership book, okay, listening to a leadership lecture. Okay, when you go to a leadership event, that encourages decisions. That's what it does. In other words, you go and say, oh my goodness, I know it's important for me to lead, so I'm going to make a decision. For example, when I taught you the law of the lid and said that everything's going to rise and fall on your leadership, many of you made a choice, probably. You said, oh my goodness, that if that's the truth, and my lid of leadership is going to determine how effective I am in my business, I'm going to have to learn to lead. That's a decision. Events encourage decisions. The process encourages development. The emphasis in the process is continuing to grow and develop yourself. The event motivates people. We all love to come and be motivated and encouraged. But the process matures people. And we're wanting to mature you as a leader. To motivate you, yes, but mature you is much more important. The event is a calendar issue. You say, okay, on this certain date, I'm going to go to an event and learn some leadership, whereas the process is a culture issue. It's being in an environment or a culture that encourages you every day to learn, every day to grow, every day to develop yourself as a leader. The event challenges people. I find it, I'm challenged when I go to leadership events. But the process changes people. Why? Because you can't change overnight. You can make a sudden decision, but you can't make a sudden change. That's a process. And there's a lot of difference between that. You see, here's what I think. I think the event is easy, and I think the process is difficult. And I want to encourage you, as you're watching these training tapes, to understand that it's a process. And it's not one day, one time, one book, one lecture that's going to change your life. But it's going through the process of doing that. And the reason that leadership must be a process is because leadership is many-faceted. In fact, think about it for a moment. There are 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Just the very fact there are 21 laws of leadership tells you just can't absorb it, or you can't learn it, or you can't apply it instantly. I was doing a leadership lecture in, a couple years ago, doing a conference. And I'll never forget, during the break, I was signing books, and this kid came up to me, and I was just out of college, and kind of probably a business major, and he was all excited about leadership, what he was learning. And I could see his passion. I love kids, because they just have great passion. So he came up to me, and he kind of gets in my face a little bit, and he said, okay, John, he says, I love this leadership stuff. So I've been listening to you all day. So I got a question. I said, what's your question? He says, what's the one thing I need to know about leadership? I thought, oh my. So I sunk mustered up to get energy. Here we go. Got to match this kid's intensity. And so I looked at him, and I kind of got in his face. And I said, the one thing you need to know to be a great leader is that there is more than one thing you need to know to be a great leader. In fact, I said there are 21 things that you need to know to be a great leader. Now, you see, here's the kid. What's he doing? He's trying to take leadership and condense it. He's basically wanting me to fast food leadership. He's wanting to come to the window of leadership and get a sack of leadership. You know what I'm saying? And take off down there with this sack of leadership and kind of eat it on the way and come out of the car as a great leader. Can't happen. Why? Because leadership is many faceted. Let me explain. Look at your notes for a moment. We've already understood that, first of all, leadership is influence. So it certainly is the ability to influence people, but it's more than influence. I can show you people that have influence, but they're not great leaders. Isn't that true? Well, it's also, secondly, navigation. The ability to take people from point A to point B to point C. So there's a navigating principle of leadership, and yet I can show you people that are tour guides that aren't good leaders. Or thirdly, it's empowerment. It's the ability to take people and empower them. Of course it is. To be able to put belief in people and let them go to a higher level. But it's more than empowerment. Number 4 is relationships. It's getting along with people. I know people who get along with me very well, but they can't lead anything. Number 5 is timing. There's a huge amount of timing that's involved in leadership, and the ability to understand timing. It's huge. In fact, there's a whole law on it. But it's more than timing. Number 6 it's momentum. If you do timing right, you get the big load going for you. And it's the ability to sense and feel the surge of momentum in organizations. But it's more than momentum. It's more than just getting the big load going for you. Number 7 is sacrifice. It's the ability to give up so you can go up. Of course it is. And yet I know people that they sacrifice and they're still not great leaders. You see, you're beginning to catch this, number 8. It's attitude. It's the way you think. And yet I know people have great attitudes and are great leaders. Now, let me just stop down. Here's what I think is very obvious to all of us right now. It's very obvious to all of us. And that is, it's many faceted. In other words, it's the ability to understand a lot of things that make you a well-rounded, mature leader. It's kind of like in the NFL and pro quarterbacks. It's kind of like a rookie quarterback coming into that major league. It's impossible for them the first year to be probably a great quarterback. There's just too much. I was up speaking the other day with the Cleveland Browns and Butch Davis and the crew, and they were talking to me. And I literally had a guy give me a 30-minute teaching on the quarterback and all they have to learn in their first year. I was amazed. I thought, oh my goodness. It's, read the defenses and understand the offense and be able to sense the shifts and be able to change the play in a moment. It's a lot of stuff. Now, here's what I want you to know. I think that the problem is, too many times, we try to microwave leaders. We put them in the microwave, we get them in our companies, oh my goodness, I got to develop some leaders. I got this Maxwell stuff, he says develop leaders, so come here, I want you to be a leader, I think you can be a leader. Here, take the microwave, you push it right, push a few buttons and zap them. By the way, because we microwave so many leaders, that's why we have so many Pop-Tart leaders, right? And if you got a lot of Pop-Tart people in your company, it's because you've been microwaving, but we need to quit microwaving leaders. And we need to start crock-potting leaders. That's huge. One more thought about this tremendous law process. That is, the secret of our success is discovered in our daily agenda. What we do every day is the secret to our success. Not what we do at one moment or not what we're going to do sometime. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Your Roadmap for Success. And I'll never forget when I wrote the book, my publisher wanted to call it Your Roadmap to Success. I said, no, you can't call it the Roadmap to Success because there's no such place. Success is not a destination. It's a journey. It's a process. So many times we confuse true success with what I call recognition of success. It's like my friend one time said to me, he said, John, all my life I've worked hard at being an overnight success. Bingo. That's so key. It's a process. The law of process says leaders develop daily, not in a day.
Okay, good word. Thoughts, questions? How about crock-potting leaders? You know, leadership is many-faceted. That's why it often takes more than one person. It's many-faceted. The secret of our success is discovered in our daily agenda. That's a great comment, a great quote. The secret of our success is discovered in our daily agenda. Mary was just on her way doing what she always does every day, and an angel appeared and said, "Blessed art thou among women." Saul was doing what he was good at doing, persecuting Christians, and was on the road to Damascus, and God showed up. See, it's in our daily agenda, our boring daily agenda, that we find God and we find success, if we're faithful to it, you see. But it's like he's talking about, we want it, and we want it now. And it doesn't happen now. It takes time. I've often said, as an example, when a church is looking for a pastor, what are they looking for? Somebody that's 30 or 40 years old. And somebody my age is outdated. They're too old. And I know something. I've just figured out a thing or two that the 30 and 40-year-olds haven't figured out yet. And when you finally figure out a thing or two, they try to put you out to pasture, you see. And because we don't understand this concept of process, and how important it is. And that's why, as an example, school is so important. Day after day, week after week, month after month, we're lifelong learners because it's a process. I can honestly say, and I have to keep changing the number because, time flies and you forget how quick it's flying. I think I've learned more in the last 3 years than 3 or 4 years of ministry than I did the first 40. Why? Line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. All of a sudden it starts coming together and you start figuring it out. But it's process. And too many people short-circuit the process or give up before the process takes place. Very good. Any questions or comments? The process encourages development and it changes people. Isn't that true? Okay, let's go to our next one, which is number 4, and that is the law of navigation. Remember, that's the one he said he wasn't good at. The law of navigation. And the subheading for the law of navigation is, anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Anyone can steer a ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Number 4, the law of navigation.
Law number 4 is the law of navigation. And the law of navigation says anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. I've often described leadership in kind of 2 terms. There's what I call the art form of leadership, and then there's a technical form of leadership. The law of navigation is a technical form of leadership. It's very tangible. It's point A to point B to point C. For example, the law of timing or the law of intuition, that's our form of leadership. It's much more subjective. It's much harder to get your hands around it. Jack Welch was exactly right when he said, a good leader remains focused. Controlling your destination is better than being controlled by it. So let's study for a few minutes the law of navigation. I brought with me something I read the other day that I just loved. And I want to pass on to you. So just kind of sit and relax for a moment. Let me just read you this, I think, humorous story. A man in a hot air balloon realized that he was lost. He reduced altitude and spotted a woman below. He descended a bit more and he shouted, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend that I would meet him an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The woman below replied, "You're in a hot air balloon. Hovering approximately 30 feet above the ground. You're between 40 and 41 degrees north latitude and between 59 and 60 degrees west longitude." "You must be an engineer," said the balloonist. "I am," replied the little woman. "How did you know?" "Well," answered the balloonist, "everything you told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to make of your information. And the fact is, I'm still lost. Frankly, you've not been much help at all. If anything, you've delayed my trip." The woman below responded, "You must be in management." You can see the train coming, can't you? "Since you must be in management." "I am," replied the balloonist. "But how did you know?" "Well," said the woman, "you don't know where you are or where you're going. You have risen to where you are due to a large quantity of hot air. You made a promise which you had no idea how to keep, and you expect people beneath you to solve your problems. And the fact is, you are in exactly the same position you were in before we met, but now somehow it's my fault." Isn't that great, huh? When I think of the law of navigation, trying to get from one point to another, there's one thing, of course, that we have to understand, and that is, if anybody's going to be a good leader and navigate, you have to know where you are. And again, I referred to on an earlier law, the Mr. Magoo thing. I mean, let me tell you something. When you get on the ship, you don't want to look up and see that the captain is Mr. Magoo. It just kind of is a little bit unsettling. And the reason for that is, in your notes, there are 3 statements I want to make. The 3 statements are these. A leader is one who sees more than others see. That's a fact. That's part of leadership. What do leaders do? They see the big picture. Is that not true? But the second statement, a leader is one who sees farther than others see. In other words, a leader is a person who looks out and he can see distant horizon and has great vision. But the third thought I want you to know is that a leader is one who sees before others see. It's also a timing issue. And one of the qualities of a leader is you put them in a room, they sense things. They sense things quicker than others sense them. It's not an IQ issue. It's not that they're smarter. It's just the fact that they have leadership within them, and they sense a need before others sense a need. They sense an opportunity before others sense an opportunity. So, what do leaders do? Especially if you're a good navigating leader, you see more than others see, you see farther than others see, and you see before others see. That's what good leaders do. Bill Eastman said one time, realistic leaders are objective enough to minimize illusions. They understand that self-deception can cost them their vision. Or Max Dupree, my friend, said this. He said the number one responsibility of a leader is to define reality. What I have found about great navigational leaders is they're highly realistic. Because they realize they have the responsibility of taking other people on a trip where they have never gone before, and they understand that they have to have experience and success. In fact, there's a world of difference. Think about it for a moment. There's a world of difference between a travel agent and a tour guide. A travel agent, they get your tickets for you, and they get brochures for you, and they send you on a trip. You know what? They send you and me on trips every day of places they've never been before. You know what I'm saying? Hey, bon voyage, have a good trip, and here are your tickets. Hope everything turns out right. Well, what travel agents, they send you where they've never been before. But a tour guide, oh, you go to the place you arrive at this place, you have a tour guide. You know what a tour guide basically says? I'm going to take you where I've been many times before. And I'm going to tell you about what I do. See, the great navigating leaders are leaders who they've been there and they've done that. But they're not in a been there, done that. You know, I've tried people who kind of go around, been there, done that, been there, done that, and they're bored. You know what I'm saying? You kind of say, well, you've been there too many times. You've done that too many times. Are you with me? So we've seen the been there. No. The great navigation leaders, they're been there, done that, but their excitement is taking people with them on the journey. I was just last week with Jim Whittaker, who was the first American to go climb Mount Everest. And when we were sitting down around the table having a wonderful lunch together, and I was asking Jim about some of his experiences, not just listening, because he just has incredible experiences. And I said, what are you most proud of? I mean, you've been to Mount Everest on more than one occasion, the top. I said, what are you most proud of? And he said, John, what I'm most proud of is, he said, I have taken more people to the top of Mount Everest than any other person. And I thought, there is a true navigator. There is a person who understands that my joy isn't getting to the top. Been there, done that. My joy is getting other people to go to the top with me. And think about it for a moment. That's what navigators do. How many of you have ever heard the expression, it's lonely at the top? Huh? You've heard that, haven't you? Now, every time we hear the expression, it's lonely at the top, we think that a leader said that. A leader didn't say that. Think about it for a minute. If you're lonely, if you're all by yourself at the top, you're not leading anybody. If you're at the top all alone, here's the thought. Get off of the top. And go down to where the people are. Go down and find your team and take your team to the top with you. That's what leaders do. Doesn't that make sense? To help me, because I am weak in this law, I'm not an A to point B to point C. It's not a strength of mine. I'm more visionary. I developed something in the 70s. I'm talking about 25 years ago, as a young leader, knowing I had a lot of leadership responsibilities and realizing I was leading people that were older than me, more experienced than me, because I was just young. I developed a wonderful process that's helped me to navigate that I want to give to you. And in your notes, I want to walk you through this wonderful, wonderful step-by-step process of how to plan ahead. Are you ready? The letter P. The letter P stands for predetermine your course of action. In other words, as a leader, what do? The first thing I do is I determine where do I want to go. I don't wait till the crowd say, let's go somewhere, and then say, where do I want to go? What's a leader do? Leaders predetermine. They think before others think. They see before others see. They've got that leadership edge. So predetermine your course of action. The letter L, lay out your goals. Basically, goals are nothing more than stepping stones. They're a process. So when I say lay out your goals, what I'm talking about basically is this. Use each one of your goals as stepping stones. So if I use this little platform for a moment, if my goal is to get back up to the bar stool, basically I say, okay, here's goal 1 and here's goal 2. In other words, lay out your goals, develop them. Now, as soon as you lay out your goals, letter A comes into being. Because as soon as you lay out your goals, letter A stands for adjust your priorities. I found this to happen. Now, I've been doing this now for 25 years, and here's what I found to happen. I found that every time I lay out my goals and predetermine course of action, I realize I have to adjust my priorities. Because you know what I'm doing? I'm doing things that are never going to get there. You follow me? And I say, oh my goodness, John, why are you doing this? Because if you want to really get there, this is your destination, you're carrying extra weight. So, predetermine course of action, lay out your goals, adjust your priorities. Okay. The letter N, notify key personnel. Very simple. Take your key personnel and sit down and talk to them and notify them and share the vision. For example, if this is my team again, what I do is I sit down and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, here's the dream, here's the vision, what do you think? And if your team is good, you know what they'll do? They'll take what you give them and they'll give it to you back better than you gave it to them. Isn't that right? They always make it better. When anybody asks me, says, John, how do I know that I have a good team around me? I can tell you how you know you have a good team around you. Every time you give them something, they give it back to you at a higher level. They take and stretch and grow you. But you notify your key personnel. In other words, you have your key meeting. You have your meeting before the meeting. You know, that's a huge lecture in itself. But you got to always have a meeting before the meeting, because if you don't have your meeting before the meeting, you're going to have a very bad meeting. Notify key personnel. Letter A, allow time for acceptance, because it's going to take a while. So allow time for acceptance. I can promise you, people change slowly. So give them time to kind of digest and process that in their own mind emotionally. Letter A, head into action. Get going. I mean, there comes a time you go. And by the way, leaders have a bias toward action. And so leaders love the head into action part. They say, okay, now it's time. We've been thinking and planning long enough. Let's go head into action. And as soon as you head into action, the letter E comes into place. Watch this one. Expect problems. The moment you create movement in the organization, the moment that you take action, expect problems. And somebody asked one time in a conference, I said, John, what? Okay, help me out here. They said, when you say expect problems, why should I have problems when I head into action? I said, it's very simple. Motion causes friction. And the moment that you head into action, somebody realizes they're going to have to make changes. Head into action. Get going. Expect problems. I got problems. You got problems. We all got problems. Okay, expect those problems because they're going to happen. Okay? And as you expect those problems and as you're moving forward, understanding it's not because you haven't learned, it's not because you're being a bad leader, it's not because you haven't done things well, it's just because problems happen to all. So let me just take a little poll here. How many of you as a leader have at least one problem? I was talking to a leader recently and he was complaining about the problems. I said, don't complain about the problems. I said, think about it. That's why you have a job. If everybody was doing the right thing, probably they wouldn't need you. This is a good thing that you have problems. But after expecting problems, always point to your successes. Always point to your successes, and the reason for that is very simple. Because you got somebody in the company that will point to your failures. Okay? This gives hope to your people. This encourages your people. And then finally, the letter D, daily review your progress. Daily review it. Sit down and say, okay, how am I doing? Am I farther along today than I was yesterday? I have found that the secret of navigation is preparation. And the best navigating leaders are those who spend time preparing themselves so that they can effectively take their people on the trip.
Okay, some valuable information. Any thoughts, any questions? Is there any way to get a little more heat in here? Good. No? A leader is someone who sees more than others sees further than others see, and sees before others see. Here's one thing about leadership that goes along with this. You know, he made the statement to some, see, exactly did he say it? A leader takes people where they've never been before. Let me add a little something to it. Sometimes they don't want to go there. Right? Places we've never been before, we oftentimes don't want to go there. And so in that sense, a leader has to take people places they don't want to go. And then after they get there, they say, oh, this is great. We should have come here before. But they were dragging their heels in the sand prior to that, see. And so you're taking them somewhere they may not want to go. The law of navigation, that is a hard law for some people. It's probably easy for others. He says it's one of his hardest. But I like his plan here, this plan ahead acrostic. It's a good way to think it through. Anyone else? I think we have time for one more, and then we'll take a break before our next class. Law number 5 is the law of E.F. Hutton. The law of E.F. Hutton. When the real leader speaks, people listen. The law of E.F. Hutton. When the real leader speaks, people listen. So let's see this law.
Law number 5 is the law of E.F. Hutton. And the law of E.F. Hutton simply states, when the real leader speaks, people listen. Now, a couple of these laws, and the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, are related. For example, I have found that the law of E.F. Hutton is closely related to the law of influence. Remember, the law of influence basically says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. The law of E.F. Hutton says when the real leader speaks, people listen. But let me talk to you about this for a moment, because I have found that this is a key in understanding people. For example, what I have found, and there are so many examples I could give you in the law of E.F. Hutton. What I have found, for example, in a group, let me go back to my team and using this kind of as an illustration. What I have found is that if you get in a group of people and there's a decision to be made, the people in that group will automatically look at who the real leader is. They just will. For example, let's just say Bridget is the real leader on the team, okay? What's your name? Rob John's my name. Nice to meet you. Okay. Rob, let's say we're in this group, and Bridget's the real leader, but Chuck he's kind of got the floor. He's talking about something that he'd like to see passed on the team level or whatever. Okay, now, if Chuck's talking about something he thinks is very important, maybe it's a budget item, maybe he's wanting some more money for his area or whatever it is, okay, here's what I'm saying. If Chuck's talking about something that's very important, of which a decision is going to have to be made, but if Bridget is the true leader, I mean, she's the real leader, she's the influencer, she's the E.F. Hutton, it's Bridget E.F. Hutton, okay? Got the picture? Here's what I found. You and the rest of the team, while Chuck's talking, are watching Bridget. Because what you're doing is, she is the E.F. Hutton, she is the real leader. And you're watching Bridget because she's going to, by her actions, give you some kind of sense of if she's excited about this or not. Does it make sense? And if for example, if Bridget starts nodding while Chuck is talking, the rest of us, we kind of smile a little bit and we start nodding while Chuck is talking. And Chuck's talking, you know what Chuck's thinking? He's thinking he's doing a good job. Chuck's saying, oh, this is really good. I'm glad I prepared this speech. I'm really doing good. Well, Chuck, you're doing good. But that isn't why we're excited. See, we're nodding because E.F. Hutton, Bridget here, the real leader, she's nodding and we're getting her signals from her. Just as Chuck, if you were given the same speech, and Bridget's got her arms crossed, and you know, it's kind of like, well, we don't want to do that, you know. We're not, and we all start crossing our arms, and you start checking, you start saying, well, I'm not doing a very good job with this. Well, no, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. You see, the issue is not whether you're doing a good job or a bad job. The issue is that E.F. Hutton either likes it or don't like it, and we take our signals always from the real leader. Now, let me just explain for a moment. This is very key in leadership. Let me give you a pointer here, Chuck, that'll help. But if you've got a proposal, and you want the rest of our team here to buy into your proposal, what you really need to do before you have the meeting with us, you need to take Bridget to lunch. And you need to have a meeting with her. And you need to be saying, Bridget, I just want you to understand that this is important. And you want to get her buy-in. In fact, Chuck, if you're a smart leader, when you come to the meeting, if you've had the meeting before the meeting, again, remember? If you had a meeting before me, if you're really smart, when you do it, you'll say something like, the rest of the team will say, team, by the way, Bridget and I have talked about this. And we think it's a good idea. Woo! That does a lot. See, because all great leaders take the vision, Chuck, from me to we. And until the vision is a vision of we, it's not a great vision. And what you need to do is you need to understand who the influencers are. You need to know who the E.F. Huttons are. And this is very key because what I have found in leading now for 30 years, I have found that the leader's responsibility is to pick out who the E.F. Huttons are. And you know what? Bridget may be one of the influencers, maybe one of the E.F. Huttons. What's your name, sir? Jay? Jay may be one of the influencers. And see, as a leader, I gotta say, okay, man, I need Jay in this project. I need Bridget in this project. What's your name, sir? Tommy. I might say, okay, I gotta have Tommy in this project. Okay, what I do is, here's what I want you to know. There may be a couple hundred people in the studio, but what I have to know is, you have to go to the influencers. And if it's Jay, and if it's Tommy, and if it's Bridget, and these are the people that are the influencers, I need to bring them in because they're the E.F. Huttons. And when they speak, they're going to carry the ball for me. In fact, here's the way I have always tried to do as a leader. I've never had a meeting with everybody until I've had meetings with the key people. And what I would do is I'd walk into a room like this and I would say, listen, gang, I'm very excited about a vision. I'm very excited about something I want to share with you. In fact, for the last couple of days, Jay and Tommy and Richard and I have been talking together. And what we've decided is this is the best way for the organization. In fact, let me tell you something. Tommy gave me a thought on this that's just tremendous. I'm the one that Tommy thought it. And you know what? When we talked about this, Bridget said we ought to do this. And Jay, what you said the other day about this, you know what I'm doing? I'm tying them all in. So they're not just following me. They're following E.F. Hutton, Jay. And they're following E.F. Hutton, Bridget. And they're following E.F. Hutton, Tommy. They're following because the real leaders have the influence, and when the real leader speaks, people listen. Haven't you had sometimes, haven't you seen this happen, where somebody stands up and speaks, and as they're speaking, nobody's paying attention? Haven't you seen it? You know, I watch them, but somebody's up there just speaking, and nobody's home. Nobody's home. In fact, there's been a lot of times I want to say, excuse me, sir, excuse me. None of us are home. I know you're exercising your jaw a little bit, but we're not listening. Remember, I'm kind of old, so I remember there used to be a TV show called The Gong Show. Yeah. And what happens, somebody's up there speaking, and when people get tired of speaking, somebody can take it, like a big mountain door and gong that sucker, and they had to be done. I've all thought, every business meeting needs a gong show. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And when somebody's up there and you're just tired of hearing, you say, can I have the mallet, please? Can I have the mallet? Not the ballot, please, the mallet, please. And just go over and gong that sucker. Let it be done. Let it be done. Because the law of E.F. Hutton said, when the real leader speaks, people listen. That's why it's so important for you and I to understand that we've got to be more than positional leaders. And in your notes, let me explain the difference between positional leaders and real leaders. Positional leaders have a title, but not always a following. Where real leaders have a following, but not always a title. Positional leaders influence positional people. I've seen that happen all the time. Oh, you're Dr. So-and-so. Well, I'm Dr. So-and-so. Here's my card. Here's your card. The only people who a lot of times positional people lead or control or influence are positional people. But real leaders, they influence everyone. In fact, let me put it this way. When you have to tell people that you're the leader of the pack, you're not. And every once in a while I have somebody say, I just have to declare my leadership. I just have to stand up and say, hey, I am the leader. Follow. That's why I love the leadership proverb. It says, he that thinketh he leadeth and hath no one following him is only taking a walk. And don't you know, okay, people taking walks? Why? They're taking walks because they're not E.F. Hutton. So what makes a real leader? What defines a real leader? Look at your notes, because I think this is huge. Real leaders become real leaders because of character. In other words, who they are. Real leaders become real leaders because of relationships. Who they know. Real leaders become real leaders because of knowledge. What they know. Real leaders become real leaders because of intuition. What they feel. Real leaders become real leaders because of experience. Where they've been. Real leaders become real leaders because of past successes. become real leaders because of ability, what they can do. What I just shared with you about real leaders becoming real leaders, spend some time there. Ask yourself, am I a person of character? Do I have good relationships with people around me? Do I know what I'm doing? Do I sense what's happening to those around me? Do I have good experience? Have I had some good wins under my belt and some past experiences? And do I have just good, decent ability? Because the law of E.F. Hutton says, when the real leader speaks, people listen.
Okay, some good stuff. Were you able to get those? You ready? What defines a real leader? Character, who they are. Relationships, who they know. Knowledge, what they know. Intuition, what they feel. Experience, where they have been. Past successes, what they have done. And ability, what they can do. You have to get the E.F. Huttons on your side as much as possible. As much as possible. Positional leaders have a title, but not always a, what was it, following? Yeah. Following. But real leaders have a following, but not always a title. See. Any questions or comments? Is this good stuff or what? And because we all have somebody or something to lead. If not, at least ourselves. Right? We have to lead ourselves. But we have family, we have, wherever we're located. And we can always learn to be better leaders. I think we'll call it a night. I think I've got this figured out to where I can get through these in the next couple weeks because we don't have the stuff with the syllabus and everything next week. We'll be able to get through a few more. But it's good stuff to chew on. I encourage you to take this and look at your notes and think about it. When you get the book, you'll read the chapters, and the chapters will say a lot more than what he's saying here. It'll fill in the blanks. So it's just a great concept of being leaders. And we need the Lord's help in being better leaders. That's what it's all about. Amen.